Hello and welcome everybody to the 17th edition of the PokerFuse podcast. It is June 6, 2019. I am your host, Mike Gentili, along with my co-host, Nick Jones. Nick, how is it going this week?
It is going very, very good indeed this week, Mike. Very good indeed. I don't know if you've heard, but there's a poker tournament, poker series going on in Nevada at the moment in Las Vegas.
Yeah, I heard something about this big festival that was taking place, but I'm not out there, so it's kind of out of my purview a bit.
Yeah, it's not on my radar at all. And if I go on Twitter, I see nobody talking about it, so I assume it's not a big deal whatsoever.
Yeah, it's probably very low key, but it's Vegas, so people tend to make a bigger deal out of things than they may otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, we've been away for a couple of weeks. I was on a holiday last week, so we've got a lot to catch up on. We will be touching on the World Series of Poker. We're not going to entirely pretend that it doesn't exist in our world, but on top of that, we've got a bunch of other stuff we're going to have to get through.
Yeah, we have a few big topics. And I think we'll probably take a deeper dive this week into some of those bigger topics because they do cover maybe some smaller topics. And we also had a special edition of the podcast that went out earlier this week. That was an interview with David Sklansky on his new book, which is the theory of poker applied to no limit.
Yeah, it was enjoyable listening to the PokerFuse podcast as a tourist, as a listener, being on a holiday, seeing it pop up into my feed and giving it a listen. So if you haven't checked that out, I think that came out on like Monday maybe, or over the weekend. So if you haven't seen it yet, do go and give that a listen and let us know kind of what you think about that format. As kind of, we don't want to replace it to the weekly ones that me and Mike do, but like as extra special editions. Let us know if that's the kind of thing you like to hear, and we can certainly do more.
Yeah, I think that's a good topic for people to provide feedback to us on. That being said, we should probably jump right in.
Let's dive in.
As we stated earlier, the World Series of Poker has kicked off in Las Vegas, and as part of their celebration of their 50th anniversary, they have a special tournament, bracelet event that they're running called the Big 50. It's a $500 buy-in, correct?
Yeah, that's it. $500 buy-in. Broken all the records. Every record of everything. It's the largest turnout for a WSOP event and largest turnout for any live poker event ever. 28,371 total entries. Paid $500 to play in the Big 50.
Wow. So what the previous record holder was the Colossus, right?
Yeah, so the Colossus in 2015, so its debut, that was also $500, or I think $565 with the rake. And that got something like 22,000 entries. So it's a decent clip above that. And so, the shtick with this one is that your first entry is rake free. So your whole $500 goes towards the prize pool. Only secondary entries, and there were 4 day one flights, and you could enter all 4 day flights if you busted out each day. Only then do you pay the rake. So really big draw for players. We've seen the Colossus seen kind of dwindling participation since its debut, but this has just kicked it right back up again, setting on new records. And by the sounds of things, it got pretty chaotic in the Rio, trying to get all these players in seats.
Well, it's from what I've heard, there wasn't any big major ordeal, which is really a testament to the organizers.
Yeah, I mean,
WSOP pulling that off. 28,000 people in a matter of 4 days is no easy feat.
Yeah, people are complaining a lot about queues. There's a lot of queuing going on to get your entry. But the slight cynic in me says, I mean, it's not that much more than 22,000, and they must have anticipated. I would think they would have anticipated that. They got 22,000 when they first introduced this event. This is the anniversary, 50th anniversary. It's rake free. It got quite a lot of buzz ahead of time. I don't know, like they should have kind of anticipated. Apparently, like they had to take over like some bowling alleys and put tables in there. They had to jiggle the schedule up, and it's quite a confusing structure. Maybe this is common for these big events, but they have like so every starting flight has its own day 2. So there's day 1A to day 2A, day 1B to day 2B. But like day 1B starts before the first flight of other day 1s have started. So you're playing your day 2, and you will cross the bubble because the top 15% get paid out. So if you survive day 2, you're definitely in the money. You just don't know how much money, and you don't know when you cross that bubble because the other flights haven't started, so you don't even know how many people are going to be ultimately playing in this tournament. And like I think the 4th flight of day 1, they got nearly 10,000 people. So yeah, I mean, also like, you know, it's a huge success. You know, I'm somewhat, I don't know. I think the WSOP perhaps likes this kind of, it's so chaotic because we're just flooded with so many people and juggling, and it's all good. It's all part of the show, I imagine. But it's been difficult even getting the numbers. Like we wrote the story up yesterday or the day before, and all the day 1 flights are complete, but we still couldn't get, like, they hadn't updated the official numbers for the prize pool or the number of entries yet. So from us being outside of Nevada, it's been a little tricky to keep on top of it. But fantastic, buzz, I'm sure, in the Rio at the moment.
Yeah, I think there's something to what you just said. I think having the existence of chaos serves to be like a blanket excuse, if you will, or you can hide a lot of misaligned things by cultivating that kind of chaos, and it also, I think, builds excitement. So when people are in the midst of chaos, it helps things feel different. So it's got its uses. Yeah.
So that tournament, we know the prize pool is $13.5 million. So like the guarantee was $5 million, so it's almost triple that. Again, like they could have made the guarantee $10 million, and I think being pretty safe. But $30.5 million. The first place prize was guaranteed at $1 million, and it's now $1.1 million. So I guess they're just I don't know, paying a lot deeper or spreading it out a lot more. They're down to 127 players. So I don't know if like day 3's complete and they're going into. Or day 3's underway? I don't know. I have no idea, Mike. Last time I looked, they didn't know if there was going to be a day 5 or not. That might come on Friday. So it's happening. Yeah.
Another big tournament that maybe not as big, definitely not as big, but significant was the very first online bracelet event for the WSOP.
Has that happened already? Has it?
It has. Yes. Wow, I can see the headlines in my mind, but I can't tell you who won it. It was someone that had a very interesting online moniker, something similar to Lucky Chewy's name. Wow, I don't know. I'm drawing a blank. So, do you know Lucky Chewy's name?
No. What is it? His actual real name?
It's his screen name. Lucky Chewy's screen name is
Lucky Chewy. I don't think Lucky Chewy is his actual name.
Yeah. All right, I'm mixing things up. Anyway, I remember that the person that won it did have a twist on a very famous online poker player's name.
Was this the tournament that Phil Hellmuth was on the final table of? Did he get first? Right, okay.
So
I did see that.
He finished in 5th place. You know I'm looking it up right now.
Yeah, you got to, really.
At this point, I made too big of a deal out of it not to.
Because his real surname is like Lichen.
Yeah, Andrew. Right,
yes.
right. So let's see. WSOP live updates. And we can look at the bracelet event, which was number 4. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry, number 7. And the winner is... Oh, yeah. So his online screen name is Lucky Spewy 1.
Nice. Like
All
it.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. His real name is Yang Quan. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. And he took down $165,263 for the win.
Yeah, so how many online bracelet events are there going to be this WSOP, Mike?
Right, so there's 9 scheduled, but the big news is that the players in New Jersey, barring any unforeseen circumstances, are going to be eligible to play in all of them, which is a bit of a departure from what was previously the case, being that there was the DOJ had this enforcement deadline that was to come into effect June 14th, and would, if that were to be enforced, would have limited New Jersey players to playing only in the first 2 online events.
Yeah, so this is, listeners will be familiar with this topic. We've talked about it, that this deadline is coming up. The WSOP had said that, they didn't know whether New Jersey players would be able to play in bracelet events after the second one, all TBD. Something happened this week, which we'll touch on in a minute, but that prompted the WSOP, or we believe it prompted, they didn't directly say so, but ultimately decided that they will allow New Jersey players, they will leave the player pool connected, we're assuming, allow New Jersey players to play all these bracelet events going past this DOJ deadline. But we should probably first dig into why we think they were prompted to make this decision. And it was pretty big news, Mike.
Yeah. So there was a court case. Listeners to this podcast will have previous knowledge of this, but there was a court case where the New Jersey Lottery Commission was challenging the Department of Justice reinterpretation of the Wire Act that came out, that was released earlier this year, because they were aware that full enforcement of that opinion could have negative impacts on their multi-state lottery operations.
Yeah, and ultimately the judge presiding over the case sided with a New Hampshire Lottery Commission and said that the government's Department of Justice, the OLC, what does that stand for?
So that's the Office of Legal Counsel. That's like the lawyers for the Department of Justice that advise them. Their
reinterpretation from December 2018 was bunk, effectively, and their initial interpretation, 8 years ago, which said that the Wire Act only pertains to sports betting, is the one that makes the most logical sense, the most logical interpretation of what is a 50-year-old statute. And ultimately paved the way for New Hampshire to continue their operations, what we understand as everywhere where they do in the United States, which is across dozens of states in the US. The judge, however, did choose not to rule on whether his ruling had wider implications beyond that.
Yeah, and so that's the really big piece, is this ruling only applies to the New Hampshire Lottery Commission and their vendor. However, the WSOP is looking at this as potential precedent for a challenge. I'm assuming because it was this event that we reached out after the judgment came down, and that's when we got a different take from the WSOP. Previously, it was, we're going to see how things shake out. Now it has been, barring any unforeseen circumstances, the bracelet events and also the online championship series will be open to New Jersey players.
Yeah, so when this decision came down, there was quite a divided opinion online from different people covering this topic on kind of how big a deal it is. So obviously it's ultimately just one judge's decision, and it is directly only impacts the plaintiff in the case, which is New Hampshire, and the company that they work with to offer their Powerball and other lottery ticket sales that they have online. However, and in addition, there's a good chance that this will be appealed by the Department of Justice in a higher court case. There are people saying that in the next court that they go to has already, there are some decisions have already been made to demonstrate that they'll probably take the more restrictive view that the Wire Act only pertains to sports betting. But as you say, it does, it puts something on the book, that clearly says that a judge, in what is a very reasoned and easy to read decision, by the way, it's actually quite interesting to read how he came to his decision. That clearly says that their December 2018 decision was farcical. Ultimately, that's my own word, but it seemed extremely clear cut to my reading.
Yeah, so from what I read, and I did not read the entire decision that he handed down, but he took into consideration the context that of the environment that was happening, everything that was going on at the time that this law was passed, to try and determine if it was limited to sports betting or if it was more broadly to be interpreted as including all type of gambling facilities. And activities.
Not to get into it in too much detail, but I don't know. To me, I found this quite a fascinating debate. That ultimately, the Wire Act in 1961, it has this one specific clause in it, one paragraph of text, where it says betting and wagering, and it says it 4 times. And the second of the 4, it includes a modifier to the term betting and wagering, where it says betting and wagering in sporting events and contests. So. That part, the second clause, is clearly limited to just sports betting. But the question is, are the other betting and wagering phrases in that sentence also modified by the sports betting and contest section? And then obviously the government argues that, okay, that's ambiguous, but it's you can't just take a modifier in a sentence and apply it backwards and forwards, and therefore the purest reading is that they don't. And then the New Hampshire position is like, oh no, absolutely, from a syntactical point of view, you absolutely do take it both ways. And ultimately, what the judge said, from my reading of it, was, it's ambiguous. It's ultimately ambiguous. You can read it both ways. What we have to do is we have to look at this law and go, were the lawmakers trying to just restrict sports betting and having it wider? And he said, it's quite unlikely that lawmakers would want to restrict one subclause of a sentence to sports betting, but leave the rest of it to wider implications. It's very unlikely that that's what they wanted to do, and he gave a lot of good reasons why. Like, for example, they said at the time this is to restrict sports betting, and a half dozen other very good reasons why it's very clearly that they were talking about sports betting. Again, to me, as a layman reading it, it seems extremely clear cut, and I can't see how a judge would come to any other decision. But of course, these things are appealed through dozens of different courts, and different judges see things in different ways, and blah blah blah. But it's a fascinating development, and one that clearly the WSOP Caesars have they have now received legal advice to say that you can probably push past this deadline, and you have very good kind of a legal defence. Why? Because these interpretations aren't themselves legally binding, as I understand it. It's just the Department of Justice's new position on an existing law, and they said that, oh yeah, up until this new decision you were fine, but now you're not. But the law itself is unchanged. That text from 1961 is still exactly as it was before.
Right. So their opinion is just a signal to how they plan to enforce that law. Now, that's not to say that they couldn't go in and start making arrests, for example. But that then would go to court, and that's where a judge's decision would be rendered. I don't see that happening. That would be quite out of the box. They are expected to appeal this decision. From everything I understand, the paperwork for that appeal should be within the next 30 days. So we'll know right away if that is the case and if that's going to happen. But the actual appeal process could stretch out for quite a long time.
Yeah. And what's very interesting to me when I was reading this is if the New Hampshire Lottery Commission, brought this case to say, hey, your new interpretation, is basically saying what we're doing is illegal. Judge, can you decide whether that's the case or not? And the judge saying, oh, no, that's absolutely right. I mean, what's interesting is the government, the Department of Justice, initially said, like, oh, you shouldn't, we're not going to go after the lotteries. That's completely fine. So you don't need to make a ruling on this. And the judge said the judge said that's absolute rubbish. I am absolutely going to. But it just makes me think, like, well, the WSOP could seek a similar judgment. I mean, the arguments that the Lottery Commission put forward would be exactly the same, in my mind, as what an online poker operator would do.
Right. And I'm no attorney, but I will be surprised if WSOP, Caesars, All-American Poker Network, all of the online poker operators don't just snap file the same lawsuit that the New Hampshire Lottery Commission did. It seems like that would be a way for them to increase their safety, if you will, or their position to be able to more comfortably offer these online events across state lines.
Yeah, and that actually touches on kind of a final piece of this story, which is that GVC, owner of the Party Poker brand, received their license for interactive gaming in the state of Nevada, which I think happened just after our last podcast, so I don't think we've discussed this.
Right.
But so an interactive gaming license in Nevada is for online poker. That's all you can do in Nevada. So that's GVC Party Poker receiving a license. Now, we said at the time, they might, that might just be kind of preparatory. It would be surprising perhaps if they launched online poker just in Nevada, because it would be segregated with this Wire Act thing. That landscape has changed now.
Right, and it's going to continue to change because we have Pennsylvania getting ready to come online. We have West Virginia, who's approved online poker. So these new states, as they're coming on, it'll be interesting to see if the state regulators give the green light to shared liquidity, and what the operators do from their standpoint as well, because technically I don't know if regulators would be violating the law by giving permission, because they're not actually performing the act of facilitating gaming across state lines. It may be just the operators that are at risk, but that's just layman's opinion. It'll be interesting to see how this whole thing starts playing out. We've got Pennsylvania coming online this summer, and the population in that state is such that we expect all of the online poker operators that are already currently in the U.S. to be participating in that market. And when you start adding in other player pools, such as Nevada, such as West Virginia, it has the potential to get significant quickly.
Got unlucky again 2 weeks ago, just after we'd recorded the podcast. I think historically we've been very lucky. Like, big news happens just before we've recorded, and a few times like it's happened at the time we recorded. Very unlucky 2 weeks ago. I think like within an hour of us finishing recording, the news that Daniel Negreanu had left PokerStars as an ambassador was released. I think by Daniel on Twitter was how the news first came out.
Yeah, it's I guess it was unexpected. Typically, we've seen a lot of these ambassador changes happening at the beginning of the year. This one was kind of mid-year and right after Daniel's wedding. It had the feel like there was more to this one than just, hey, the contract is up and we couldn't come to an agreement.
Yeah, I mean, this is... I don't think you can understate just how... big of a deal this is. He's obviously one of the most recognizable poker players around. This is the largest. I mean, he's been ambassador for I don't know how many years it was.
12, I think.
It was 12 years. He would have been paid very handsomely for that ambassadorship. He has been an extremely outspoken supporter of PokerStars. He is extremely vocal on social media. He does vlog on YouTube. He's on a weekly podcast. He gets deep into the thick of it in the poker spats and defends PokerStars regularly with the decisions that they make that are frequently unpopular with the kind of the high stakes, high volume crowd. And he is also playing all the big life tournaments. He is massive, and the PokerStars decision to part ways with him, I think, is extremely telling about the direction the company is taking.
Yeah, he's by far the most visible poker player in the world, and I don't think anyone even comes close. Even Phil Hellmuth, for all of the self-promoting that he does, is not doing anything near what Negreanu's doing in total.
Yeah, and Negreanu also does have an online poker experience. I mean, he doesn't play a lot now. He spends a lot of time in Las Vegas, but he is Canadian. I think he still maintains a residence there. I don't think he's played online for quite a while, but he has done in the last couple of years. And he's done things in the past, like he's tried to take on the 200, 400 games on PokerStars was a big thing a couple of years ago. So like he bridges that, and he's intimately familiar with the online product. That's the other thing. Like, you might not agree with his opinions, but he talks about rake. He talks about high volume players. He talks about rewards programs. Like he understands.
Educated.
He's extremely educated on the topic. He is his record on the live scene is second to none, really. I think he's only just recently lost the number one on the all-time money list and live tournament earnings. To
who? Do you know?
I would have done 2 weeks ago. Come on, Nick.
Justin Bonomo.
Is it Justin Bonomo? Yes. I was gonna say that. 100%. I was gonna say that. So you can't understate how big a deal it is. Obviously, with these things, when people part ways, you never really know what goes on behind the scenes. It could, in theory, just be Daniel saying he doesn't want to continue doing this anymore. It could be that the two, went into contract negotiations and one party wanted more than the other in terms of output or in terms of money. Having listened to Negreanu on the Dat Poker podcast, it left me in no minds about basically PokerStars ended the contract themselves.
Ah, really? So I haven't listened to that episode as of now. Do tell though. He didn't
say that explicitly at all, but the conversation immediately just centered around PokerStars kind of making changes to their business and it being a business decision, and no one posed him the question, have you done this because you got something else lined up, or it was very much, what are you going to do next? And he said, I'm going to keep my options open and It wasn't like, I've got big news coming next week, or right. It just, the conversation was just very focused around, is an amicable split, Sometimes companies move in different directions and it's all fine. I mean, I wonder whether PokerStars said, if you want to stay on, you have to be, coming to Europe more to do more live stuff here and play online more, and we want to use you in that way. And he doesn't want to because he started the family. He wants to start a family. He's just got married. But I don't know. And it just fits into what we've seen from PokerStars here in terms of really wanting to extract, if they're spending money, they want to see the return. And right. they want to justify that.
I think one of the big questions that I have, and I'm very interested in your opinion on it, is do you think the events leading up to this parting of ways, in the events that I'm speaking of, for example, the podcast spat that happened, Daniel was involved in some very public and vocal bickering back and forth, and during the course of such exchanges, I think there was some things that may have not been, let's say, that are pushing the envelope when it comes to corporate acceptability type things.
I don't know. I'd be surprised. I don't that would be the reason. Again, from a spokesperson point of view, I think it was extremely good for the company, and. Yeah, he's, to give somebody the freedom to speak on, come across honest in vlogs and on podcasts and generally speaking up the company, you have to give them the long leash to, sometimes get a bit dirty. The guy is on the live scene, he's got strong opinions, and he's always been that way. So I'd be surprised if there was just like a straw broke the camel's back type scenario. This feels more like a corporate decision. That's just, again, it's important to state that, like, this very much, Daniel Negreanu had the opportunity to quit on his terms. He was the one who announced it. PokerStars has put out no PR about it whatsoever. Last time I checked, his likeness is still used in the cash game lobby. I imagine he's been removed from the ambassador thing on the website, but like all the communication has come only from Daniel, and he's clearly not said the specifics of what went on. So this is just purely my speculation here.
So then let me ask you this. What is the future of the PokerStar ambassadors? Do we see somebody stepping in to take Daniel's place? Is that just a move that they're making that is going to be less focused on big names and more distributed in local markets and through sports stars? What do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the first question in my mind is who else isn't safe? If you'd asked me prior to Negreanu's departure, like, who's never going to leave? I'll be like, well, Daniel won't, obviously, because he is PokerStars. Moneymaker won't, obviously, because, of his story and everything. And now I think, like, I don't know, I mean, everyone could go, right? Moneymaker's a very interesting example in the sense that, again, he is PokerStars as much as Daniel is. Again, like, he don't need to repeat his story. Like it's all PokerStars, but like he's US, and how do they really utilize him? That we heard very good things about the Moneymaker Tour last year and how successful that had been for PokerStars, and but that's the US market, and now apparently he's doing a tour in the US and Australia which is unconnected to PokerStars. I don't quite understand it, but he put out something on Twitter promoting a Moneymaker Tour which is not PokerStars connected. There's no repeat of the PokerStars sponsored Moneymaker Tour. He obviously doesn't play real money online, so I'm not, if they're using this logic with Daniel and saying we're not getting our dollars worth. I think Liv Bury and Igor as well. Igor has connection with the Russian market, but again, great spokespeople in my mind. But if they're using these same equations, I'm not quite sure who does make the cut. Obviously the people they signed up are reaching very specific demographics. Twitch streaming, they've got a new stable of pros, and then they're working with just celebrities. Their Indian online poker room is using a big Bollywood star on TV advertising. Interesting, they've signed up Ramon Collias in Spain, and they're using his likeness a lot, and they're promoting him a lot. But again, he has a very close connection to the Spanish market. So yeah, I don't know. I think anyone else who's still on the books who's US, yeah.
I would think I would be surprised if PokerStars and Moneymaker part ways. That just, it seems like, and I have no idea what kind of compensation package Chris is getting and how it compares to Daniel, but I would think that is a story, that's a narrative that PokerStars would want to keep intact. That being said, I was shocked that he seems to be pursuing this live tour without the sponsorship of PokerStars. So maybe that's an indication that things could be changing with regard to Moneymaker coming soon.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and it's absolutely the story that PokerStars wants to tell. And of course, as you say, like with all these things, we're talking in descriptives, but ultimately it's going to be a monetary decision. Chris Moneymaker might cost a 20th of what Daniel did, in which case, you plug that into this equation, that we, and it's going to come out very different. As I just went onto the PokerStars Team Pro page, and the number one person is Chris Moneymaker, and then Liv Bury, and then of course Jason Somerville. Again, you would assume Jason Somerville is kind of, I don't want to say completely safe. It's a two-way street here, but you would think they would, he brings so much to the table in terms of the Twitch streaming. And then we have Fatima, who's a really interesting person to still have on the books, because obviously she was originally kind of like a sports star, and I don't think she really has the broad poker appeal. And then we have Igor, and then we get into kind of more the regional stars.
So the one that I look at as being the real, if this person is gone, that signifies change, and that's Liv Bury. Because she has traditionally all the things that a brand would want in an ambassador. And if she's gone, that to me signifies that things could be changing drastically with regard to the ambassador program over at PokerStars. I can see that where she has the ability to increase her role there. That hasn't seemed to have been the case recently. Mm-hmm. So that might be a little bit of a hint as to the future direction. But she's got live, she can play online, she's highly Europe focused, which is a lot of where PokerStars business is. She speaks English, so she also has appeal to the U.S. market. She ticks a lot of boxes as far as an ambassador goes. But whether or not they are going to start promoting her as or more than they have, I think that's the thing that I'm going to be looking out for.
Yeah, and I think just from I think Daniel Negreanu is in a very strong position. This is the thing, like with the US market, hopefully growing in the next couple of years. I mean, he's extremely sought after, and his reach online on social media is unprecedented, really. And like, he could get into Twitch streaming for WSOP.com. He could get, he's got a lot of opportunity ahead. I would think.
Right. So why hasn't Party pounced? That's another big question that I have. I mean, they have been very aggressive with pursuing former PokerStars ambassadors, or even courting current ones and bringing them over. This is a big one. He seems to have the most name recognition of any poker player. Is it just a money thing?
Yeah, maybe because his US focus is kind of outside GVC's, primary markets.
Maybe he's so big it just takes time to work out that deal. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean I guess the thing working against Daniel is just that he's been so outspoken on certain topics that if you go to a poker room that has quite different strategy to execute, and you can't all of a sudden have him switching and saying, "Let's rake it back."
Yeah, true.
But it's a fascinating story, one that we probably won't get much more detail on. This speculation is probably the best we're going to get to. But
yeah, very very interesting times in the world of poker ambassadors. There was a significant event that took place last Sunday in the PokerStars Sunday Million, as for the first time, it failed to meet its guarantee since they implemented the new $109 rebuy.
Yeah, so listeners will remember, I think as our very first episode, we talked about the news when they introduced this 109 level, so they halved the Sunday Million. This is PokerStars' big, perhaps the most iconic online poker tournament in history, and it's been going for over a decade, I want to say. And yeah, they changed it to the 109 buy-in, kept the
buy-in. I said rebuy earlier.
Kept the buy-in at 109. Kept the guarantee at $1 million. So they needed 10,000 people to turn up. And when it first started, the prize pool was like 1.5 million. Since then, it has declined. With some exceptional kind of one-off tournaments, specials that they did, declined pretty much week over week, to the point that on Sunday we saw its first ever overlay. And it was quite a significant one. They attracted just under 9,000 players. They were 1,000 short, more than 1,000 entries short of covering. So an overlay of over $100,000. That alone is, it's drop in the ocean of PokerStars money. From the tournament themselves, they made 80,000. So it's the cost is irrelevant, but the implication there of the dwindling interest at this buy-in is worth a pause, if nothing less, and it raises the question of whether PokerStars makes changes to this going into the summer.
Yeah. So looking at the graph that we have over on Poker Industry Pro, that 10% dip underneath their required number of players to make their guarantee is quite significant when looking back over the course of time. And I have an idea as to why. I'm curious if you may have some thoughts on why this past Sunday was more significant in terms of a decline than it has been in previous weeks.
Go on, shoot.
Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
I think that it's probably related to people traveling to the World Series Poker.
I don't know. I thought you were going to say that. I don't know if is it that many people? I mean, we're talking about like 10,000 people. Like, how many people from Europe travel to the World Series of Poker at the start to play the Big 50? We're talking about 10,000 entries as well. Unique players is only like 7,500 that they need. So, I mean, there were some big things. Obviously, like they just finished Scoop. Scoop was hugely successful, and $100 million was paid out in prize money. That means players spent well over $100 million collectively playing this 2 or maybe 3 week tournament series. So, like, obviously that happens every year, and so the Sunday Million after that can often see lower participation, and we have seen that in the past. I think we do have all the details on our pro article, but I think in like 2015 or 2016 it has happened before. The one straight after Scoop has seen lower turnout. Also, we're just going into the summer period. So, like, it started in January, which is the absolute peak of the seasonal period for online poker. As we go into spring and summer, we see less turnout. Numbers do decline. Now, obviously, PokerStars would have hoped that it declined but still stayed above the guarantee. But these are definite factors. I don't believe that people challenging the WSOP can really make a blip. I could be wrong, but
if we're talking about only a player pool of say 7,000 to 8,000 people, and we're talking about a 10% decrease, I don't think that's out of the realm of possibilities. The smaller the potential player pool is for this tournament, the more likely it is to be impacted by a particular event.
Yeah, and it's overlays are significant in the sense that smart players realize where there's going to be an overlay and then join, because if there's going to be a 10% overlay, you're getting a big discount on your entry. I mean, you're basically paying no rake, I suppose, in one sense. Right. And so quite often what you'll see is a very small overlay, because a lot of people will join, or they'll re-enter if they busted out where they perhaps weren't planning to. And you think at the 109 level, it's a lower price point, more people might be more frivolous and be like, oh, this is going to overlay, I'll jump in. 10% is a lot of people deciding not to do that, or not being aware that was going to happen. So despite all the these caveats that we've got, it was Scoop, there is a WSOP, it is summer. I mean, two of those factors stretch on for the next 6 weeks. So the question is, and the summer gets quieter and quieter until I think August might be our low, September, something like that. We will see less people. So PokerStars has to either decide whether they are going to, suck it up, maybe put more promotion into it, maybe run more satellites with guaranteed tickets, and maybe make a PR thing out of the overlay, because that can often. We have seen nothing. This was our own numbers and research has put this together. So we've seen nothing from PokerStars on that, because I don't think they're going to be happy with that kind of overlay week on week. Right.
And we've seen Party Poker also have a significant overlay, and they took that opportunity to use it as a marketing tool, right? Or at least I remember Rob Young saying that was
that's
something
interesting
that they like to do.
Okay, yeah. So I don't think they did do that. In fact, again, what Mike's referring to there is they just ran KO series, which ran in tandem with PokerStars Scoop. They had a very ambitious $30 million guarantee, which they've done series that big before, but for a bounty-only tournament series, running quite soon after their last Powerfest, that seemed quite ambitious. And indeed, they did suffer over $1 million of overlays total over the course of this series. That's not a small chunk of change. But as I understand, this is the analysis done by us. I haven't seen anything from Party Poker kind of promoting the fact that they overlaid this much. We have heard from Party in the past that they see overlays as kind of a marketing tool. So what did Rob say on the podcast?
So maybe I'm confusing some of my Party Poker heads here. I'm reading directly from the PokerFuse article that Anuj had authored. And, he quotes an interview with poker industry pro Tom Waters a couple of years back.
Okay, yeah.
Saying that, and Rob Young as well, that Rob Young said recently, I never mind overlaying because it's putting money into the customer's pockets. And in reality, 50% of the money that you put back into your customer's pockets ends up back in the pockets of the operator.
Yeah, and that's all true, sure. And so maybe that $1 million perhaps is maybe too much money to be putting into your customers' pockets, but it was and so obviously PokerStars is not the only one that can see an overlay, and Party Poker is not, I don't think, going to shy away from these massive tournaments that they run, kind of regardless of what happens.
Yeah, Tom Waters in the interview with Pro a couple of years back had said that he views them as marketing expense. It's interesting to note, though, that being the case, that there was no official PR, and maybe that they're saving that for I'm not sure. It was like in PokerStars situation, you can save that for the next Sunday Million, but now that the KO series is over, there's really no way to market that for future events. It doesn't seem anyway.
I mean, the way to do it is whilst the series is running, you say like, right. We had these overlays last weekend. Make sure you come this weekend because there'll be a lot of value on the tables. But yeah, so just going back to this Sunday Million, I'm presuming that it's going to be running the same this Sunday. I haven't heard anything different. What's interesting is during Scoop, they had some special edition Sunday Millions. One returned to the $215 buy-in level, and that did extremely well. $1.3 million prize pool, smashed the guarantee. Whether that's just because it was during Scoop anyway, or whether that kind of highlights an underlying demand for it to return back to that buying level, I don't know, because the week after that they had a 530, so like a 4 times size, and that exceeded $1.5 million.
I don't know. I still struggle to think that players would want a $200 buy-in as opposed to a $100 buy-in. I mean, I can understand that they would want that. I guess I have a hard time thinking that they would just not play it because of that price point.
Oh, yeah, but the thing is, at 215, you only need more than half the number of people who play the 109. And so, so that's what we're looking at. So obviously, when they did the 215 and it had a $1.3 million prize pool, that's still less people that overlaid in the one last Sunday. It's just they were only paying half as much.
Right, so if you have a potential player pool that is X amount and a very high percentage of those players are willing to pay the 200 price point, then it makes sense why it would succeed at the higher price point where it wouldn't at the lower price point.
And then so that's the question of whether they return back to the 215. I'm not quite sure where else they can go. They've ran a knockout special one time that also did very well, but I don't know. I mean, I was going to say I can't imagine that they're going to make it knockout permanently, but I suppose nothing's off the table. I mean, knockouts do just seem to do extremely well. They do great for the operator as well because they're raking all the bounties. So maybe we'll see that. Maybe they'll do that over the summer. Maybe they return to the 215 over the summer. But I wouldn't expect that they'll do something. I can't see them just sucking this up and week over week, so we will see.
And what's the situation with re-entries in the Sunday Million? Is it limited to one or is it unlimited?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm going to say it's limited to one, but you're testing me there.
I'm actually looking at the image that we have with the Poker Industry Pro.
Oh yeah,
I could see in the lobby that it says one re-entry available.
Well, there you go. There's one easy way to improve it.
So I mean that's another potential path forward is allowing multiple re-entries.
there's the saving grace option is to say the players have spoken, it's going back to a 215 and turn it into a positive event. I don't know. I think it's kind of a shame. I know a lot of people and other podcasts lamented the change from the 215 to the 109. I personally think it's just it's a price point that I just feel so many more people feel like they could pull the trigger on without worrying about it too much if they want a bit of Sunday entertainment and get a good few hours of entertainment for $100. $200 is a lot of money for a lot of people.
So do you think they could lower it and be successful?
It's interesting that they haven't tried that once. Like from all these special editions that they haven't tried it. I mean, obviously there's a huge risk because that's just now you need 20,000 people. That's just a lot of people to be playing on a Sunday. But you could drop it and have unlimited re-entries. Drop it and do a bounty. I don't know. Yeah, maybe we'll see that.
It sure sounds like it would be a premier marketing opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we'll call it now.
$1 million and throw maybe a $50 buy-in tag on that. That would be.
I'll play it. There you go. I'll play it. I'll fire a couple of billets.
All right, it's outro time again. It seems to be probably the most freeform part of the podcast.
Because it's as if it weren't freeform enough. We're just generally speaking just so rigid to the structure of this podcast. So what do you have? What witticism or insight do you have for us for the outro tonight, Mike?
I have nothing. Totally I guess I would ask you. All right, here's a question. Being that we did a special edition of the podcast and we did that interview with David Sklansky, I'm going to throw it over to you and ask you, who would you like to see us interview next?
Wow. I think there's loads. I mean, there's loads of people. There's loads of. So the big question is, what can we do different that other people don't do? And I think the David Sklansky thing was a great opportunity because this is a new book. We knew that he wasn't really working with anyone else to do a podcast. So these are questions, and the discussion that you had wasn't anywhere else. And I found that very interesting. I think just the history of the book, I think it's just a really interesting topic. So, I would love to, we could interview Phil Galfond, but he is not shy about doing interviews with anyone. And the guy speaks his mind. So it would come down to, do we have the questions to put to him that would make it an entertaining listen?
He would be high on my list. So I think the thing with Phil is, though he has been quite generous with his time and gone on other podcasts and has his own blog, I think some of the questions that we might ask might be a bit different than things that he's been exposed to on other podcasts. And I think the time has also changed as well, so the topics might be a bit different.
Question for you then. If we had Rob Young on the podcast, would your questions be different to the questions that Jeff Gross has?
Yes, absolutely. Wow, now let's get Rob Young on
there it is.
On the pod. That's a good idea. Yeah, they'd be a little bit different.
Yeah.
All right, well, that's a wrap for us. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. As always, please feel free to provide feedback at PokerFuse at PokerFuse on Twitter, at SpookyBugs on Twitter, at
PokerPro Jones
on Twitter. Email us. However you can get in touch with us, please feel free to do so. We're always looking for feedback, and we will see you again next week.